Welcome to the Coaching Summit 2025, this year with a theme of diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, and brought to you by In Good Company, a global coaching training organisation bringing you coaching qualifications and ongoing CPD for coaches. If you're inspired to continue your learning, then be sure to check out our website at igcompany.co.uk. But for now, we invite you to sit back and enjoy the amazing lineup that we have for you today from our expert speakers who all share a passion for our theme of diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. Enjoy!
All right, welcome everybody to this amazing session. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to introduce you. Oh, yeah, got the sound right. Sorry, I cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to introduce you to Michelle Knight. She's an executive coach, an inclusive leadership specialist, and the founder of the Art of Transforming Work. She's a former legal director and EDI board leader, and Michelle brings first-hand experience of navigating all these complex systems and rising to senior leadership in environments where inclusion was not a given. And today, she partners with organizations to build inclusive leadership pipelines, unlock the potential of diverse talent, and support high-performing leaders to lead with presence, confidence, and purpose. And just personally, she's also just an amazing person to listen to. It's been my privilege to know Michelle for a little while and to be able to share learning spaces with her. So welcome, Michelle, and welcome everybody to the room.
Oh, thank you, Gwen. Thank you so much for that warm and generous introduction. I am truly honoured to be here today and so grateful for the opportunity to share this space with all of you. If you can bring up my slides for me, Gwen. No, I am not a techie person, so I have said to Gwen she can't rest during this talk. She has to play an integral role by sharing my slides. So thank you so much for that. The title of my talk is Coaching That Sees Me. But when I say that, I'm also speaking about coaching that sees you, your full humanity, your story, your leadership, and the systems that shape the spaces you navigate. Too often, coaching assumes that treating everyone the same is fair. But fairness doesn't always mean sameness. And sameness doesn't always mean safety. Identity matters, context matters, and our ability to see both can either open doors or leave them closed. Today, I want to share how intersectionality helps us honour the full complexity of identity in our coaching work. We'll explore how different shows up in the coaching space, not just in what's said, but actually in what's left unsaid. We'll talk about how we as coaches can create more space for truth, courage, and growth. Next slide, please.
Listen to me. There you go.
So, as Gwen said, my name is Michelle Knight. I'm an executive coach, inclusion specialist, and founder of the Art of Transforming Work. My work and strapline is Leadership Reimagined, Inclusion Realised, Impact Delivered. And we work with organisations to unlock the full potential of underrepresented talent and build cultures. We combine executive coaching, inclusive leadership development, and EDI-informed strategy to help clients transform how they attract, retain, and elevate diverse leaders, creating measurable, lasting change across the business and actually improving their bottom line. As Gwen said, I am a former lawyer. I spent 18 years in legal practice in rooms where I was often the only woman because I worked in construction and regeneration, often the only Black woman, often navigating things I didn't have language to yet articulate, like power dynamics, performative inclusion, and burnout, masked as resilience. Those rooms shaped me. They gave me expertise, but they also gave me empathy for others around me. And today, I now coach brilliant women and collaborate with bold organisations to create leadership cultures that are inclusive. My lived experience in the workplace is not unique, and that's why this work matters. Next slide. So, What exactly is identity neutrality? And I bet you're thinking, I'm sure she said this was about intersectionality, but we need to go back a step before we branch out into that topic. And let's begin here with identity. Our identities are the sum of how we see ourselves and how others see us. They include our race, gender, class, sexuality, ability, faith, and so much more. It's a non-exhaustive list that I've provided. And they shape how we experience leadership, work, and power. Identity neutrality is the concept that coaching is most fair when we treat everyone the same. And that sounds ethical, it even sounds progressive, and it actually sounds like people who are heart centered and people focused. But it's often built on the myth of meritocracy. The truth is, not everyone starts from the same place. And when we ignore identity, we ignore context, that being inequality and systemic bias. And coaching loses its power to truly transform that individual. We risk misinterpreting what a client is experiencing. For example, we might label someone's silence as a mindset issue when it's actually a trauma informed response to being repeatedly shut down. We risk offering advice that reinforces dominant norms. A woman of colour may be told to be more assertive. That to me sounds reasonable. But in a workplace that already stereotypes her as aggressive, being more assertive may actually be quite harmful to her. And we risk pushing the clients to adjust to systems that are actually excluding them, rather than helping them navigate or challenge those systems. Now, let me just do a caveat right here. I am not here to tell you that your coaching practice is wrong or to berate you and say everything that you do is wrong. What I am here to do, though, is share my lived experiences, my coaching experience, and the women and unrepresented groups that I have worked with to help you elevate your coaching practice to go deeper, better, quicker, and more impactful for the women that you work with and the other groups that you work with. So, in terms of the ICF and EMCC, which I've put on the board there, they don't explicitly use the terms identity neutrality, but they absolutely promote cultural sensitivity, psychological safety, and a contextual understanding of the client's experience. And this work aligns deeply with our ethical responsibility as coaches. On the slide there, you can see Diane Abbott, the UK's first Black woman MP. And this is a real world life example. She has endured relentless racist and sexist abuse throughout her career. According to Amnesty International's 2017 study, she received 45% of all abusive tweets sent to female MPs in the 6 weeks leading up to the general election. And in 2024, someone publicly stated that she should be shot. Can you believe it? That level of abuse isn't just personal, it's actually systemic. Now imagine a coach responding to Diane with identity neutral language, saying something like, just don't let it get to you, or focus on your mindset. That's neutral, but it's also erasure of her lived experience and her reality. So I'm hoping you're beginning to see the importance of intersectionality in our coaching business. And a point of reflection for you, I would ask you, what does neutrality look like in your coaching practice? What are the things that you lean on which are neutral and sameness and promote fairness, but maybe having a potentially detrimental effect to your coaching clients? Next slide.
Before we do that, so do you mind if I ask you a question, Michelle?
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, because I've just been thinking about what you've said, and I think about kind of when I go into DEIB spaces, and I always hear somebody say, but I've been taught that we need to treat everyone the same, and that's how we avoid bias. So why isn't that enough? And what should we be doing instead?
Well, that's a very good question. And I think this is just my opinion. Treating everyone the same often sounds fair, but it can unintentionally erase their experiences, as what I've just said, and forget to navigate systemic barriers. Instead of defaulting to sameness, I would say get curious. Ask questions like, how is your identity shaping how you show up? Or what unspoken rules might you be navigating? That's where real transformation begins. And it's an ongoing process. It's not ask 2 questions and you'll be a hit. It's something that you kind of develop and evolve in your practice. But those are probably 2 places and 2 questions that I would ask.
Very good. There's a comment here that says, if you don't see my reality, you don't see me. I should not still be handing out Blackness 101 prompt sheets to those who put themselves in the position of being qualified to help me. It's a great, great comment.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Who shared that comment?
That was Maureen. So thank
Wow.
you, Maureen. Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So we're getting into the crux of it now. So what exactly is intersectionality? What do we do instead of fairness, sameness, and neutrality? The term was coined in 1989 by a legal scholar and civil rights advocate called Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. At the time, she was observing how Black women in the United States were falling through the cracks in legal and policy frameworks. Their experiences of discrimination weren't being recognised because systems were only looking at race or gender, never both. She introduced intersectionality to capture how systems of oppression, that being racism, sexism, classism, etc., overlap and create unique barriers that can't be understood through a single lens. Now, this lens is especially important in our practice because clients don't experience life in categories. They bring overlapping identities, histories, values, and vulnerabilities to our coaching practice and to the coaching session. Intersectionality helps us as coaches ask richer questions, understand risk and resilience more deeply, and coach the person, not just the presentation of that person in that session. And without it, we risk giving surface level solutions to deeply rooted challenges. And with it, by including intersectionality, we begin coaching in a way that I believe truly honors the fullness of who our clients are.
We have a question here that says, navigating that language used is such a tricky space, especially, and someone else said, especially as coach learning, as a coach learning the practice. And then Maureen asked, what makes it tricky? But and even answering that question for some people can be difficult. Knowing just if you want to answer, this is a learning space. This is a space to get if you're worried about the language, we'll help you with that, but get your information that you need. But how do you react to that, Michelle, that it's so tricky to manage the language in this space?
It is difficult, and it's not something that you know automatically, but it's something that you have to be curious about, as I said, and go on a learning journey about. Intersectionality feels like a big academic term, but what it actually means is seeing the whole picture. And I think if you can see it in those terms and explain to your client that you may not get everything right, but you're on a journey to support them, it begins that conversation. And without understanding those layered experiences, however you present the language, but if you do it in a space that allows the client to open up, then you will get more understanding of the language, you'll get more understanding of the experiences, and be able to move forward with that client and with your coaching practice generally.
Fabulous. And then Amy asked, what was the question you said about inquiring around their identity?
Oh, I'm on the hoof here. I can't even remember what I said. I just give it out. I just give out what I have. I'll have, you know what, Amy? Get the recording, because I can't remember what I said. And that may be perimenopausal or other things, but I can't remember.
But maybe sometimes it's also just about being willing to inquire, just being willing to be curious and setting the stage of saying, look, I'm going to do my best here, but I promise I may not get it all right, but I'll promise I won't get it wrong twice, right?
That's true. And I have to admit, I have got a later slide which talks about inquiry and how to do it in practice. So I will pick it up at that point.
Great.
Thank you. So intersectionality in coaching, how do we apply intersectionality? It's a massive term, a massive topic, but how do we apply it in our actual coaching sessions? And the reason that we're applying it, as we've said before, is because we want to facilitate, as coaches, transformation for our client. And when we use intersectionality, it holds up a mirror to our client's internal world and to society and the systems around them. So it's more than a theory, it's actually about being admired closely, and it's a practical lens that helps us coach more wisely and powerfully. So you'll see on the slides, I've got a couple of points. And the first one being intersectionality and identity. It's about acknowledging identity in the coaching sessions. Our clients, as I said before, don't walk in as a job title or a goal. They walk in as what I've said before is carrying layers of identity. And those identities shape how they're seen in the world and how they see themselves. And so it's really important that we don't ignore the identity, because otherwise, I believe that we risk coaching. We risk coaching being seen as a mask, and we mask the real person that's underneath. And instead, when we center intersectionality in our conversations, we honor their whole story, and we begin to understand why certain goals feel risky and why some spaces feel unsafe. And also, in my experience, why confidence isn't always about mindset, it can also be about personal history. Another thing is when you reframe your thinking, both when you're speaking to the client and yourself. I'm talking about you, I, me, and all of us. One of the most powerful shifts we can make is moving from what's wrong with this client? Why are they not getting this concept? Why is the model not working? To what has this client been navigating that is preventing them from getting a breakthrough with these questions that I'm asking? Do you see the subtle difference, but the deepness and richness that comes from that? And I'll give you a quick example. One of my clients, she's a brilliant woman and she works in senior operations. And she is neurodivergent, though it wasn't widely known at her workplace. And for years, she had been masking, studying neurotypical behavior, rehearsing responses before meetings, forcing eye contact to make others feel comfortable. But it was actually exhausting for her. And she came to coaching because she felt like she was failing at leadership, not because she lacked skill, but because her way of showing up didn't fit the mold of her workplace. A previous coach had encouraged her to be authentic, but never asked what being authentic would cost her. Although that was well intended, those comments missed the structural and social realities that coachee was trying to navigate. So when I had a conversation with her, we reframed the goal. Instead of asking her to perform authenticity, we explored what psychological safety looks like for her and what boundaries she could put in place to conserve her energy, honor her needs, and still lead with presence. And that shift for her changed everything. She stopped seeing her needs as barriers and began designing her leadership around her strengths, not someone else's template of what she should be doing. And that is what intersectional coaching invites us to do, to question what we take for granted and to honor what works for one client may harm another, and be willing to do the interrogation to see what best works for that client in that session to make the most impact for that client in that session. And then the other one is application of coaching models. Now, don't get me wrong here. I love my models and the models work. But what we need to be aware of is that the mainstream coaching models like Grow and many of the transformational approaches were actually developed in white male Western contexts. So they have an assumption around individual agency, linear change, and consistent access to power. Now, for marginalized groups, that is unlikely to be the case. And so when you are using the models, intersectional coaching means you should ask, does this model honor the client's context? Does it leave space for identity, for structural barriers, for trauma, and for culture? Now, I am not telling you to throw out the modeling and coaching tools, but what I am asking you to do is to stretch them, that we deepen our questions, that we hold space for stories that the model may not have imagined, but in doing so, we become not just more inclusive coaches, but better ones for every person that we coach. And then finally, client behaviors. We need to be, I like to say, Miss Marple in my coaching sessions. There was a woman who was a detective and her name was Miss Marple, and I used to love watching it. But anyway, that is not the point. We need to be detectives in the session with our client, because clients can self-censor and misinterpret. So here's what often gets misread in coaching: silence, hesitation, and deflection. The client who doesn't name what they really want, who avoids visibility, and who hesitates before giving a bold answer. Now, we might see that as resistance, but for clients from marginalized groups, it can actually be a sign of survival. And you're thinking, what on earth? But there was a study done by Catalyst in 2021 titled The Emotional Tax on Women of Color in the Workplace. And 45% of women of colour in the UK and the US report feeling they must outperform to be seen as equal. Many hold back their ideas or adapt their communication style due to fear of being stereotyped as angry, ungrateful, or difficult. So when a client says stay silent, it may not be about confidence. It may be a wisdom born out of their experiences. And our role is to recognize that, to pause our assumptions, and to ask gently questions like, and I've done it in my practice, what feels possible in this space for you? And what feels safe for you in what you want to do, what you're trying to achieve? Because when we become a detective in those sessions, the clients don't have to guard themselves. They can actually make themselves open to growth. And as we coach them, we become part of that client's liberation story, which is massive. It's absolutely massive. I heard there, Gwen.
I love that liberation story. I'm like, oh, I'm writing that one down.
I'm glad it's resonating with you. Next slide.
There's a really good question from Grace. She says, this is so insightful. Thank you. But please, could you give me an example of what stretching a model would look like?
So, for example, in the Grow, what I like to focus on is the R and ask more deeper questions. So I might ask something like, how does that reality work for you? How do you navigate? How do you show up at work? What is your presence like? And is that because that's something that you've learned, that you've seen from others that have a similar identity to you, or others that don't have a similar identity to you? How do you code switch in those spaces? So basically, You still use the grow model, but you simply, based on what the client says to you and your information about that client, you just go a bit deeper. And when you do that, it may be uncomfortable, but it's okay to be uncomfortable, and it's okay to have the silences with the individual, because some of them, when I've coached in the past, have never had to think about these issues on a conscious level. It's always been unconscious. So when you bring that reality to them, there may be silence, and it can be, I'm not saying it's therapy, but it can be a deeper soul reflection that they'll be doing with you by you asking those questions. And if a question doesn't resonate with the individual and you've given them a space and a pause to answer, maybe ask it in a different way, or ask them, like, why are you not able to answer that question? What is stopping you? What is the gap? What do you need from me to be able to process and answer the question? I hope that helps.
Absolutely.
So, how do we go from being well-meaning? And I have to say, all the coaches that I have and have met and worked with intentionally want to be well-meaning. They want to help their clients. They care deeply, and they don't want to harm individuals. But how do we go from being well-meaning to actually being well-equipped, which comes back to one of the points that somebody mentioned earlier. I've put up 5 shifts that I think we need to make as coaches to ensure that we move from service level inclusion to real, sustainable, transformational practice for the people that we work with. And the first one is inquiry, not assumption. The best coaches, they actually stay curious. Rather than assuming a client's experience, we invite them to share their story. So we ask things like, is there anything about your identity or background that you think might be influencing how you're approaching this situation? This tells the client, I see you and I want to understand you. And so I'm asking this question to deepen my understanding of you. And next, we need to be prepared to look at contextualizing behavior. So I used the previous example of silence, of being afraid of being seen as aggressive. Another example would be what looks like perfectionism or over controlling and shows up in the sessions, but that may actually be a form of self-protection. Someone who has experienced criticism, exclusion, or high scrutiny in the past may cling to control as a way to feel safe or maintain credibility. And in that scenario, we have to ask what systems or past experiences might be shaping this behavior. It helps us to coach the root, not just the surface. Number 3, normalizing identity. We have to make normalizing identity reflections part of the process. And how do we do that? We need to see identity isn't something separate from leadership or goals. Identity actually informs the leadership and their goals. When we ask what has shaped your values, or whose expectations are influencing your choices, we're opening the space for both honest and powerful insight, which only leads to richer coaching experiences with that particular client. And in the midst of doing that, you are continuously with that client building trust and psychological safety. Safety for me isn't just a feeling, it's actually an outcome of intentional practice. When the client knows they can speak without judgment, they will, and I say it again, they will go deeper. They will reflect more honestly, and they take bigger and bolder steps. You literally can see the uncoiling of the individual as they are sitting there before you. And that is because you have built that trust and psychological safety with that individual. And the most important thing, and I experienced it time and time again as a Black woman in senior leadership, being asked, what do I need to do, Michelle, to improve the way I do things? What do I need to do, Michelle? Michelle, can you do the work to inform this change that needs to happen? And that can actually be quite exhausting for the marginalized person. A better way of doing it is own your learning, because this is key. As coaches, we can't rely on our clients to teach us about identity, bias, or systems. That's our work to do. And through sessions like today, through reading, learning, reflecting, and community and accountability amongst the coaching community and others that you work with, we grow, and the safer and more impactful our sessions become for those that we're trying to work with. So yes, it takes practice to do this, but it's really worth it. And we move from well-meaning to truly well-equipped for each and every client that we serve. And that is a beautiful thing to be able to do as a coach, and a beautiful thing to receive when I've been on the opposite end of it, to receive as a coachee, going back into the workplace, going back into the challenges, knowing that somebody has seen your whole person, and the questions that they've asked has allowed you to dig deeper within you, to bring out that richness, those jewels, to enable you to fight the good fight in the workplace, and be all that you can be. Next slide.
Right.
So I feel like I've been talking for ages, and I hope this has been a rich and useful session for you. So my final thoughts is, why is this so important? And I've said it already, because it leads to better outcomes for your client. I have been in the workplace where I've code switched. So I've been outside on the phone to a friend, talking in colloquial language. And then I've gone into the work and I've code switched to what is appropriate to those in my workplace, even though it's far and it may be foreign from the culture that I'm used to. Code switching and self-censoring, they begin to show up fully in the coaching sessions when you ask those questions of your coachee. And it allows the coachee to walk in and not code switch, not self-censor, and be honest and be confident when they leave the session, because it unlocks more aligned and meaningful conversations, which then lead to more meaningful and aligned goals for that individual. Clients can then take action that reflects their true values and leadership style, and their progress, trust me, and I am an example of that, their progress accelerates because it's actually authentic to them, and you help them realize that. Secondly, for personal growth for you as a coach and your coaching practice, and the ability to have a professional edge, you will grow in confidence, presence, and depth in your sessions. You begin to ask sharper questions, hold silence for your coachee more skillfully, and become the coach that clients trust with their whole story. And this kind of coach builds reputation and referrals. This isn't just theory, it's actually professional edge for you. And according to the EMCC, in their Professional Charter and EDI Framework 2023, the demand for coaches with demonstrated EDI awareness and cultural competence has grown significantly, especially in public sector and global organizations. It's no longer a nice to have, it's actually a differentiator between coaches in the industry. And organizations are seeking coaches with depth to hold complexity. This gives you a clear professional edge over your colleagues. And it's not just about knowing your models, it's about your mindset, your awareness, your presence, and how you impact and integrate with others. So I can't sing the praises higher of why intersectionality is important for your practice and for your own personal empowerment. And then for number 3, from safety to empowerment. So safety is the beginning. Psychological safety is the beginning in the sessions. And once you get there, most coaches will stop there because the client is safe to share. But that should not be the destination. When your coaching environment feels genuinely safe and allows the client to go deeper and move beyond survival mode, the client stops managing perceptions and starts exploring what bold, values-led leadership looks like for them. So it means that they can move forward and you can be part of that journey, that liberation journey that I spoke about before. So yes, intersectionality transforms your practice, but more than that, it defines the kind of coach you become. And I've put a quote on there from Audre Lorde. It is not our difference that divides us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. Now, that was a real ouch moment for me in how I looked at my coaching practice, because it's an invitation for us as coaches to do this work, not because it's easy, because at the beginning it definitely isn't easy, but because it is actually essential, and because it is how we lead with courage, integrity, and lasting impact for us and our clients. Next slide.
8.
So, thank you so much for staying present with me during this session. And if my talk has sparked reflection, challenged your assumptions, or made you sit up and say, hey, I need more of this in my coaching or my organization, I'd love to connect with you. So I have tried to put on the QR codes here, and I've practiced and they seem to work.
Love that.
Sign up to my newsletter. It's for coaches, organizations, and inclusion-minded leaders. And it's where I share practical tools, honest reflections, and fresh thinking on how we lead with equity and impact. And for signing up, I will share the slides for today and also a list of questions to help you with your practice and to start thinking about it. And also the main space that I am on is LinkedIn. So I'd love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share inclusive leadership, my thoughts on executive coaching and the realness of things that I've been through, my lived experiences. And it's a place for real conversations. So I'd want to hear what's resonated with you, what's going on with you in your business, because as coaches, we are a community. It's not I, it's us. And how you're building your own inclusive legacy and how I can support you in doing that, how you can support me with collaborations and everything else that's so spicy and great about being coaches. So I'm Michelle Knight, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Michelle. That was absolutely amazing. There's so many nuggets there. I hope everyone saves the chat just by hitting those 3 dots and clicking save chat, because there's so many questions, so many comments that are so insightful. We have time for maybe 2 questions, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you. So I think about, my supervisees, and I think about what I hear when I'm out. And what I often hear people ask is, how can I, as a coach who doesn't share my clients' kind of lived experience, how can I help them move from safety to empowerment? So for me, as a cisgendered heterosexual white woman, to be the first person to name, oh, you're a person of color, for some inexperienced coaches, that can feel a little bit daunting, because you're like, oh, I don't want to trigger, I don't want to do something. Or any other version of intersectionality. So how would you respond to that?
I would say you don't need to share the experience of your coaches, but you do need to hold space for what their experiences are. So you do that by asking questions and opening up the conversation and holding space for silence and deep reflections of the individual. Empowerment begins when a client realizes they can lead on their own terms. But to get to that position, they need to, if they're not fully embraced it already, which I assume not because they've come to coaching, they need somebody to ask the difficult questions and allow them to have space to reclaim their voice. And what I would always say to individuals, when you're having chemistry calls, if you think it's relevant, raise it in the chemistry conversation. Would it be helpful for them to be challenged around intersectionality? And also, I would always put in the caveat and say, I am an individual, I'm only human, and I'm on a learning journey. So some of the language that I may use may be uncomfortable for you, but it's from a place of helping you expand rather than a place of making you close. So therefore, if I'm asking you a question and it doesn't hit where it needs to be and it makes you feel not uncomfortable because of the experiences you've been for, but because of the language I've used, share that with me in the coaching sessions and help me to reframe how to use better language to allow me to get the best out of you in the coaching session. So I summarize and say, it's not about you sharing the experiences, it's about you being courageous to ask the questions. And as you go on the journey, your language will improve, your understanding of others' experiences will improve, so you'll get better. But in the chemistry call, have a frank couple of minutes conversations about language and how to challenge on the identity and intersectionality subject to make sure that your client knows from the outset that you'll be doing this, but you're doing it in a way that is not to cause them harm, but to allow them to actually blossom in the coaching sessions.
Oh, what a great answer. Thanks so much, Michelle. I could talk to you about this all day because you are just like this fountain of knowledge. So I'm certainly going to be looking forward to your LinkedIn and going into spaces there. But just thank you so much for being willing to share your expertise with all of us. Thank you for showing up. I encourage everyone who's on today, just remember there's lots more to come. So do make sure that you're attending these other sessions. Yes, there will be recordings that'll be sent out. And Michelle, I know yours is one I'm going to watch on repeat to make sure I get all those nuggets in there. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.